Welcome to the Daily Items High School Football Podcast, our weekly review of each local high school football game scheduled for this weekend. And now, here are your hosts, Daily Items sports editor Kurt Ritzman and lead football writer Todd Hummel.
Hello and welcome to week 3 of our Game Night Podcast. I'm Kurt, this is Todd.
Man, I'm still not getting used to this new schedule where it's 2 days after Labor Day. We're in week 3, heading into week 3 already.
I know. 2 games in August doesn't seem right.
No, and it's not like it's getting any cooler out too.
What has jumped out to you? We're a fifth of the way through the regular season.
Did you have to do that in your head?
Yeah, quick math.
I would have done that with a pen. I think the first thing that jumps out at me is Lewisburg being 2-0. I think they had big hopes going into the season, and they've certainly come through. And I think Schick's probably a little worse off than I thought they were going to be at 0-2 right now and kind of struggling a bit. But I think other than that, things have kind of gone chalk so far. I mean, everybody knew Southern was going to be pretty darn good. I think we could throw Danville in the surprises. Not that they're 1-1, just how well they have played offensively with a semi-new offensive line and kind of a new offensive set. They've been pretty explosive this year so far as well.
So we mentioned Lewisburg, kind of a little bit of a surprise at 2-0 and 2 really good performances. Got another tough test at home this week. Our game of the week, you'll be heading there when the Red Tornadoes head up to Lewisburg.
Yeah, and Mount Carmel's coming off that loss to Southern Columbia where they really struggled offensively. I think it was 201 total yards and had 7 3-and-outs, I think. And they just really couldn't get their run game going. And this is an interesting matchup. Just Lewisburg ran for 450-some yards last week. Max Boyers had 356 and 5 touchdowns against Central Mountain.
That's good. If you're not sure, that's good.
Yeah. It's a good thing this is free. I hope people weren't paying for that content. But, yeah, Max Boyers had 5 touchdowns, 356 yards on the ground. Really exploited some holes in the Central Mountain rush defense. And, Mount Carmel has one of the best rushing defenses in the area. Really shut down Southern's running game last week. They kind of do it. Their 2 defensive tackles in the middle really clog space and allow those 3 linebackers, Johnny Ayers, Dick Troutman, and Jack Chapman, to make a lot of plays. And the defense did a pretty good job on Julian Fleming. Only had, I think it was 6 or 7 catches for 40-some yards early on in the game. Now 2 of those were short touchdown catches late in the first half. But, until he broke a big play late, the Tigers really didn't have very many big plays against that Mount Carmel defense. So I'm really interested to see how Lewisburg and Mount Carmel match up in that way. And then, of course, there's a lot of Mount Carmel ties with Lewisburg. Yeah. Coach Persing was a Mount Carmel assistant to John Dara out there and Coach DeFrancesco until 2016. Dylan Farinato and Nick Shedleski both grew up in Mount Carmel before they moved to Lewisburg. So it's a lot of interesting subplots to this game. And I'm just kind of see how Mount Carmel bounces back. Their offense has not been what they wanted the first 2 games of the season. Mm-hmm. And Coach Dara mentioned that they've made some adjustments and switches. Kind of interested to see what they are. And they really haven't gotten John Ayers on track yet. Hasn't cracked 100 yards, 82 and I think 49 so far this year. So, it should be interesting. It's hard to believe that this Mount Carmel team might be 1-2 after the first 3 weeks of the season. Going to go with Lewisburg in this one just because they're at home. Going to be interesting to see how just how this turns out for them because Coach Persing said gave me the Coach Franklin line about going 1-0 every week, but also mentioned they win this game and this is a culture changer for them. Maybe that some of the students start to believe. You get more players out, and looking at that schedule they have, if they win this game, I think people will give them a legitimate shot to go undefeated this season. There's some big games later on, but there's no Southern Columbia after moving up to Division I. Beating Mount Carmel probably makes them the favorite against Shore That's Shore, Schick, and Shamokin are what's left in Division One. So, I think this is an interesting game for Lewisburg, and it's going to be neat to see how it turns out.
So you're buying into Lewisburg?
I'm buying.
A win over Selinsgrove in a freshman quarterback's first game, and then a win against a Central Mountain team that I don't think we think is excellent.
Yeah, but, it was also 55-7. It's not like they struggled with Central Mountain.
True.
And, you probably have the best player on the field in Dylan Farinato, and that made the difference against Selinsgrove, and that probably makes a difference against Mount Carmel.
Okay. Thing we've talked about every time we've done this is someone is going to rise up in Hack 2.
Oh, all right. I was like, I thought we were going Southern's good.
Nope. We'll get to that later. Someone's going to rise up in Hack 2, and there's a great chance for someone to do that this Friday when 1-1 Mifflinburg heads to 1-1 Milton.
I think that was one of the more surprising results to me last week was Mifflinburg getting shut out by Bloomsburg up at Redmond Stadium. I think Mifflinburg's a little better than that. I'm not sure what happened up there, obviously, didn't see it, but that Bloomsburg team might be a little better than I thought they were. I mean, everybody's going to get blown out by Southern, but, that Panthers team was really hit by graduation losses. And it's going to be interesting to see, Warrior Run was able to kind of move the ball in the second half against the Milton defense. And between Gary DeGroat Jr. and Riley Stahl, their Mifflinburg can certainly be balanced and run and pass the ball. And it's interesting to see if Phil Davis plays this week. Mm-hmm. Kind of a little surprised. We were surprised that he did not play last week. But, Kamor Bradley stepped in and ran for 192 yards in a completely different offense than what Milton had been running previously. Well, not really a completely different offense, but using the wing tee a little differently and more of a running style rather than throwing the ball around. And that kind of, that's got to give Milton confidence that if they were able to win a game with their backup quarterback and still run the ball, that they're we talked last week about them being consistent offensively and balanced offensively, and that's where that balance leads you. You kind of can survive those games without maybe one of your best players. And now, I think going into this season, without looking at the schedules, if you would have, one of these two teams at 2-1, I think they'd be pretty excited. And obviously Milton hasn't won more than 1 or 0 games in a couple of years, and a 2-1 going into the third week of the season, that's got to give a team like Milton a lot of confidence.
Yeah, and you talked about not having Phil Davis, a quarterback, but what that also took away was one of Milton's better weapons, Gwalen Rice, who caught a 2-point conversion pass from Kamar Bradley, but without getting him the ball downfield, that like you said, limited them a little bit. After Milton's win against Warrior Run, Scott Dudinsky talked to Coach Phil Davis about what he saw from his team.
I think there's no comparison between this year and last year. Last year was my first year, and the kids were just still trying to gauge whether they wanted to buy in or not. I think the kids are buying in. I think they're totally committed to playing for each other and being there for each other. You heard the break at the end. They yell family. They truly believe that and play like that. And I think that was pretty obvious tonight. So I'm really pleased with where we're at and hoping we can continue to keep moving forward.
Okay, we just talked about Central Mountain and how Lewisburg ran all over them. This week, Central Mountain has a long bus trip down to Shamokin where they face the 1-1 Indians.
Yeah, I think people are going to find out how good North Schuylkill is.
Mm-hmm.
Really ran all over Shamokin last week. What was it, 70 some carries? And so in the first 3 weeks of the season, first 2 weeks of the season, North Schuylkill's run over Shamokin and Loyalsock, and then in the scrimmage, Coach Kaiser talked last week about how North Schuylkill really dominated them in the scrimmage.
That's Danville's
scrimmage. So, North Schuylkill is a really good football team. And, Shamokin was able to move the ball late. Bryson James has made himself into a really good running back. And I think, honestly, the biggest difference in this Shamokin team is the ability to pass the ball. That was the biggest thing last year. Really couldn't throw the ball, really limited offensively. And Colin Bowers came back this year, after getting hurt last year, and has really thrown a nice football from some of the highlights I've seen, and that's really helped them out. So in this Central Mountain team, against Williamsport, really rang up some points behind their passing game with the basketball player Colin Jones, and Lewisburg did a real good job of limiting him to, I think it was one catch for 36 yards last week, and that's where Shamokin's probably their concentration is going to be. In either of their two games, it doesn't look like the Wildcats were able to run the ball, so you can really concentrate and stopping that offense. And I think Shamokin's going to be excited because I think Shamokin's probably going to be 2-1, after 3 weeks, and that's going to be a big confidence boost for them. Plus, that makes next week really interesting for them, where the Indians travel to Southern Columbia and Henry Hynoski's return home to his alma mater. But I think before we get that far, I think Shamokin wins, and actually I think Shamokin wins this one pretty easily because, I think in other years the Indians have kind of sleptwalked through this game because they expected to win, and like last year got upset by Central Mountain. I don't think this happens last year. I don't think this new coaching staff allows that to happen, and I think the Indians win this one pretty easily.
We'll move up to Danville, coming off a tough 1-point loss to Loyalsock with a disputed touchdown. Some things didn't go the Ironmen's way. They're hosting 0-2 Warrior Run, looking for their first win under new coach Chris Long.
This is going to be a tough one for the defenders. The Ironmen have scored 40 and 41 points in the first two games of the season. That passing game, KJ Riley to Peyton Riley, cheap plug. Going to be the cover story this week. Going to run up there later on this afternoon to talk to the both of them. Danville has been really balanced in both games. They've scored most of the time through the passing game, but you look at their numbers. It's 181 yards rushing, 170 yards passing. They've been pretty balanced and really actually spread the ball around in the running game. Austin Millard, Joey Harris, Peyton Persing. So that's three guys with at least 12 carries so far this season. And then, you pick your poison. Peyton Riley had 3 touchdown catches in the first half last week, and from his brother. And then later on, and don't worry, Shane, we got this. Shane Kozik caught an 83-yard touchdown pass. Or it was more of a catch and run more than anything. It was kind of a short pass and kind of weaved through the defense. So, Danville has a wide variety of weapons. And Coach Chris Long, actually just got off the phone with him before we started this, talked about how that makes them so much more difficult to prepare from because they're trying to attack you from the outside, or they're bringing Persing in motion with his speed out of halfback, or just banging you with a fullback in the wing tee. So they have a wide variety of ways to attack you. And I think Danville bounces back. Warrior Run's just looking for a little more consistency in general. Coach Long said that their effort level in the first half is not where he would have liked to have been, and it's been much better in the second half. And it's a combination of two things. One, first game's a rivalry with Muncie. There's a lot of emotion there. And then the second game, another rivalry game with Milton, plus they honored Chris Hill before the game, and he said the kids were really emotional about that in the first half as well. So it'll be kind of nice to maybe go on the road, play a team, just play, for lack of a better way to put it, a normal game this week. But I think Danville's too explosive, and I think Danville probably wins this one fairly easily.
I think you're probably right. One of the things I think has gotten overlooked with the two losses has been Ahmad Keys has made some really nice plays for the defenders in the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, and from basketball and some of this coming on at the end of last season, he's probably one of their best athletes. But again, they fell behind early to Muncie, and Milton scored all 3 of their touchdowns in the first half last week. The kind of was it 20-0 or 20-7 at the half, and it's just a matter. They just have to kind of avoid those slow starts, to try and stay in some of these games in the first half to give themselves a chance to win.
The team that edged Danville last week, Loyalsock, is 1-1. Hosts Shikellamy, who's looking for its first win still.
You mentioned about the controversial touchdown, but, Connor Watkins has got such a strong arm. On that play, I kind of looked like the receiver was out of bounds in the end zone when he caught the ball late in the first half. That doesn't take away the play of Watkins rolling out to the right and throwing a 48-yard BB into the end zone, which was an outstanding play. And that's, Loyalsock has had some defensive problems the first 2 weeks of the season. Gave up 40 to North Schuylkill, gave up 40 to Danville last week. So, if the Shikellamy offense is going to get healthy, it's going to be against this Loyalsock defense, where, Do we have a read on the I don't know if we quite have a read on the Schick offense yet, though, just because, Danville defense looks like it's going to be pretty good.
Yeah.
And then Central, I think that's the strength. Despite Gensimer and some of their offensive, I think that's offensive abilities. I think that's the strength of the Central team as well. And they just Shikellamy kind of got worn down by that Central running game in the second half as the Blue Jays pulled away. They'll kind of have to avoid that against Loyalsock. I think Loyalsock wins this one, but I think Shikellamy and Coach Tilford would just like to see a good effort, get some points on the board and just get some confidence going in, because it doesn't get any easier, because they next week it's rival Selinsgrove in that Rally in the Valley game. So I think they would like to get some success this week to have some confidence and something they can go to work successfully against the Seals next week.
Speaking of the Seals, got a win last week, and Danny Shockey, we talked about earlier, had a really nice second game as the quarterback, almost 300 yards after throwing for mid-80s in week 1.
And Coach Hicks said yesterday, that they feel they can be more balanced than maybe they thought they would be able to this early in the season, just by the way Shock performed last week. Now the big issue for the Seals coming into this game is they got banged up against Jersey Shore. They're going to be missing 4 guys, which is not what you want to do when you're heading out to play the defending Class AA champions. But Coach Hicks says, you don't really have much to lose. There's really no pressure on them, and they won't quit. They're going to go out there to go try and win. But my first chance to see Southern last week, and even though they weren't crisp, they still put up 41 points. And they still really had little issue in the second half. There really wasn't much issue in the second half who was going to win that game. Now the big thing is the right side of the Tigers line is, I think Coach Ross said that they kind of count the tight end as more of an offensive lineman. So they're replacing 3 of 6 over there, and that experience kind of shone through against the Mount Carmel defense. And he's interested to see how these guys kind of perform against a really aggressive 3-5 that Selinsgrove plays. And it's really weird for a team to win 41-7 and not be satisfied or really happy with the way they played. I talked to Julian Fleming about that a little bit last week, and here's what he had to say.
It definitely is an unsatisfying win, if that's the way I could put it. We had so many more things we could have capitalized on. We had a ton of unforced penalties and stuff. We don't get every call, but every once in a while, we just can't make mental mistakes like that. Could be a change in the game, but overall, it was a good win against a high-quality team. But we have a lot of stuff to improve on.
Just the way you guys are running your offense today, it looked like you rather going a little short early on, then trying to hit the long stuff later. Was that just something the defense was giving you guys, was those short routes?
The corners were bailing really quick, and we didn't have a run game right at the beginning. So we just figured we could get the ball in the playmakers' hands, press center high, or Gavin or Gage even on their quick squares, and just see what they could do in the open field when nobody's it's not a big line clogging everything up.
One side of the ball that played really well for the Tigers in that game against Mount Carmel is the defense. Like I said earlier when we were talking about Mount Carmel, limited them to 201 total yards. I talked to Southern Columbia's All-State linebacker Cal Holliday a little bit about their defensive effort on Friday night.
Yeah, we knew they were a power running team, and we knew that coming in, watching a lot of film. We just knew where he had to be.
Does it help, playing this like the third time you guys have played them in the last couple years, that you're kind of preparing for it?
Yeah, there's a lot of tendencies, and you remember things from previous years, and it just all helps. It all builds from the years previous.
They hit you early on with a couple of those sweeps. What did you guys kind of change up after that first series to kind of eliminate that?
We just adjusted our defense. We got athletes. They knew what they needed to do, and we just did it, and that's what happens. I don't know.
Defense played well. Offense showed up in the second half. But is there any concern from Mount Carmel shutting them out in the first quarter, which had not happened for quite a while?
Yeah, I think so, and I think there's always concern. There was concern last year when they struggled running the ball against Mount Carmel. But Coach Roth also pointed out that, he thinks that this might be the best defensive front seven that they're going to see all season. Wow. And, I think he said after the game, regular season or playoffs. So, and he really thinks that that's who they're going to see in the AA final, depending how the bracket shakes out. So yeah, I think he's concerned. I don't think he's too concerned because I think he really respects that Mount Carmel defense, and I think I think he's probably happy to have something to work on at this point in the season. Just, they've been so good these last couple years. You could point to something and say, "Hey guys, you're not perfect. We need to work on this if we want to achieve the goals that we think we can."
Leaving the Heartland, Midwest has a bye week, so coming off their first ever loss, they get 2 weeks to get ready for week 4.
And hopefully Trey Lauber is healthy for them. We saw that how much that they're going to need him after he went out in that first quarter last week, and they really struggled offensively.
So we'll turn our attention to the Tri-Valley League. Line Mountain 1-1 heads to Halifax. How much concern do you think there is for Line Mountain? Lose 42-0 week 1 to Tamaqua. Then last week score 14 points in the first quarter against Susquehanna and don't score again, I believe.
Yeah, I think it ended. Yeah, they didn't score again.
14-6, I think, a win.
I think there's a little bit more concern of Halifax team. I think was down 28-7 and rallied to win 41-28 last week over Upper Dauphin. I think we're kind of forgetting that they've Lime Mountain lost some real good kids from that team last season, and Brendan Kreger, was enough of a talent that kind of took some pressure, opened up some things in the passing game, and I think they kind of missed that second weapon. So, and Evan Herb hit his brother freshman Aiden last week for one of those touchdowns. So it looks like they're trying to develop him as one of the, as maybe hit the second receiver for the Eagles this year, instead of, relying on Brevin Dirk, who I think has 7 or 8 catches through the first 2 games. I think it's just, again, it's consistency. It looks like that they struggled, a little bit with turnovers. They moved the ball after those first 2 possessions last week, but were kind of unable to get in the end zone again. And the defense played pretty well against a run offense that, they struggled kind of stopping the run against Tamaqua the first week of the season. It'd be interesting to see how this Halifax responds to that big win last week. I think we talked. The Eagles have Tri-Valley League hopes, and you have to go with them here if they're going to win a title. This is one of the teams that they're going to have to beat before you get to the Williams Valleys and the Newports and the Tri-Valleys and then upper echelon of the Tri-Valley League. I probably should have led with Tri-Valley instead of went Tri-Valley League.
Probably.
But yeah, I think Line Mountain wins this. I think they're probably would like to see a heck of a lot more consistency offensively than they've seen in the first 2 weeks of the season, and I have a lot of confidence in that coaching staff that they'll figure it out. And now it's a matter of limiting, a young defense, limiting on offense that put 41 points on the board last week.
Talking about Line Mountain, it feels like last year. Moving the ball, struggling with turnovers, and then all of a sudden they beat Newport, sneak into the playoffs, go up, upset Wellsboro. I mean, I would assume that they're hoping for a same kind of maturation throughout this season as they got last year?
I think so, and I always make fun of you for not being around here, but this Line Mountain program, other than that, there was like 1 or 2 years in the early part of the 2000s, and then the 3 years before Brandon Carson took over. That Line Mountain's always been one of the top programs in the area, and this coaching staff has been together almost as long as I've worked here. So like 26 years between Brandon and Mike Carson and some of the other guys down there. So they kind of know, and they know what they're doing. They're familiar with the opponents. I just think it's just a matter of getting some of these young kids comfortable in some roles, and maybe that they are not used to being in on Friday night, and they'll figure it out. And I think they'll get more consistent like they did last year, and it'll be interesting to see how good they are come the end of the season, because I think most people would 3 of the 4 semifinalists in AA to be the 3 teams from down here in Southern, Mount Carmel, and Line Mountain. But obviously the Eagles are going to have to get a little more consistent offensively for that to happen.
Then our last game of the week is that Upper Dauphin team who gave up that rally to Halifax, hosted Millersburg, who I really thought turned a corner after that week 1 performance. Not as good last week. They dropped 0-2, extended that losing streak.
I think the big thing for Millersburg, you look at it, the first 2 weeks of the season, I think they've given up 806 yards on the ground. Nativity went over, it was like 410, and Pine Grove racked up 396 last week. And, I think that's what Upper Dolphin's going to try and do to them. This is a rivalry game. The Route 25 Bowl, as I like to call it, or the Route 309 Bowl, which depends on which part of town you live in either place. And so I think Millersburg's able to keep it close, especially with that passing game. Wasn't quite as good as it was in the first week of the season when Caden Feaster threw for 356 yards. But, don't have much of a read on Upper Dolphin yet. I think people thought that this was the year that in the second year under Kurt Smeltz, that they would be much improved. They had a pretty, this crew of Trojans has played since they were freshmen, and they're junior and seniors now. And I think, they're probably a little disappointed. That's another rivalry game for them, that Halifax game. And, the Wildcats rallied to put them down. I think, I think with a veteran team, they probably are able to bounce back from that and get a win. But it would just be interesting to see how they answer that challenge mentally against a team that most people they feel they probably should beat in Millersburg.
Okay, that's all our games for this week. Make sure to pick up Friday's Daily Item with the game night section featuring a cover story on the Riley brothers up at Danville and previews of the other games. In the normal sports section will be Todd's picks and column. Then Friday night, follow along on dailyitem.com with our live blog and our updated scoreboard, which I'll do as soon as I can after everyone scores. Saturday's paper will have all the results from Friday Night Football. Monday, we have the notebook of interesting tidbits from other games Friday. And then come back here next week and watch us talk about Week 4.
All righty.
Thanks.
Thank you.